I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed. Just like the woman on the other mic. She's been on the show before. At some point, we started meeting each other out there on the road and became friends. And she's back by popular demand. I'm talking about my friend, Miss Cynthia Thurlow. How you doing, Cynthia?
I'm doing well, Vinny. Really looking forward to reconnecting.
No, this is great. I think the first time we ever spoke was because you were pushing your book, your first book. Was that it? And you came
No,
on the show and
no, I think it was before then. I think we
was it?
were talking on Twitter, and this is I tell people all the time. Some of my favorite guests are people that I interact with on Twitter, and so we were chatting it up on Twitter. And I think you came on my podcast, I came on yours, and then last year was the book, and then you had a new documentary. So always reconnecting.
Yeah, and now I'm working on documentary number 4. It just never seems to end. And it's this small community that we have where we're trying to help people and push people in the right direction. And sometimes it seems like a Sisyphean effort, just trying to do any and all of it. I talk to Neanderthals about this sometimes. It's like, are we doing anything? Like, is anything actually happening? Whenever I put something on Instagram, and I don't have a very big Instagram. I think I have somewhere between 70 and 80,000 followers. People don't follow old guys on Instagram. They'll follow you because you're young and hot and you put up great information. So you guys get a big thing. But whenever I put a thing on Instagram that seems to be somewhat controversial, people come out of the woodworks and go, "What? You're crazy. You're a lunatic. You're a clown." Whenever I see that I'm getting 400,000 or 500,000, views, that means, oh boy, I'm going to be called a heretic, a lunatic. They're going to tell me I have a tinfoil hat. They're going to tell me all this stuff only because I'm trying to give good information.
Well, and it's interesting. I just interviewed one of the co-creators of Mind Body Green, Jason Wakeup, on the podcast, and he talks about in his book the fact that the more polarizing your perspectives are, the more likely things are to go viral. And the more disturbing something is, the more likely it is to go viral. And so, unfortunately, on social media these days, a lot of what gets traction is negativity and polarization. I mean, I can think of some people that we both know in the health and wellness space who go way out on a limb with some of their opinions. And
Yeah.
it's very polarizing. And when people are really polarizing, they tend to get a lot of attention, whether it's good or bad. And I agree with you. I mean, half of my team's job is blocking either spammy or wildly inappropriate people. It's like, that's not even energetically, I don't even want to interact. Like there's no one that's going to be able to help this individual. They're so wildly biased in their perspectives that I'm like, okay, there's no way that we can help them. But I agree with you that sometimes you wonder if you exist in a vacuum, and hoping that we're reaching individuals who really can benefit from our messages.
I'm going to see if I can find the one that I did a few days ago, and I want you to hear it.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me where the problem is with this post. And listen, you know me. Do not placate me in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
Tell me, no, you were off base, or just tell me where I am. The caption, the thumbnail says, "The 3 foods you should never eat." Okay. Let me see. Turn this up. 3 things you should never have for breakfast. Number 1, cereal, hot or cold, is not good. That includes things like grits and oatmeal. There's nothing special about those. They will still cause a big old glycogen load. Number 2, any kind of creamer. This is not cream. This is creamer. This is the that you put in that's full of chemicals. Out. No more. And number 3, turkey bacon. Come on, folks. You can't get bacon from a turkey. And in order to make it taste even like a reasonable facsimile, you got to put all kinds of crap in it. All right. Stay motivated. Okay. That was the post.
I think that's completely reasonable. And people got upset about that. I bet you it was because of the creamer.
Well, some of the early comments, when it's within your group before it gets outside of your group, because they give people what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
The early comments were, "Oh, wow. Thanks. I didn't know about the creamer." Right? Thanks. I thought cream and creamer was the same thing. It's amazing that people confuse those two.
Right. Well, I think a good sign is if the creamer is on a shelf.
Yeah. Well, whenever I did another post about it, I said, look, if you don't have to refrigerate it, you should be concerned. If you think it's a dairy product and it's on the shelf, that's like whenever you walk into any kind of business and you go, hey, do you have, coffee? Do you have cream? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they got those little thumb packs of cream that's been sitting out for a month. Okay, if it can make it through an apocalypse without ever seeing any form of refrigeration, you have a problem, right?
Well, I think people can be very protective of their coffee. How dare you say that I can't put the Coffee Mate? Can I say that? Coffee Mate? I'm trying to think of the brand that like stands out. But there's even, there are coconut milk creamers that are full of crap. I'm like, if you really want cream, then have cream. If you really want to have, if you don't tolerate dairy, have, full fat coconut cream. I mean, that's
Right.
something that actually exists, but for some reason we want to make things more complicated for ourselves.
Well, some people had, but once you said, I wrote back to them and said, no, use real cream. And they were like, okay, gotcha, thanks. I didn't know. Some people were somewhat butthurt over the turkey bacon because they thought they were doing better than regular bacon. Now, I do have an issue with some of the regular bacon, meaning I tell people stay away from the name brands like Oscar Mayer, Hormel, this kind of thing. You don't know what's in those things. Most people don't know that you could go to a real butcher and get bacon like you've never tasted bacon before in your life, right? And they'll go, well, wait, isn't turkey better than, because they're under that belief that somehow anything from a pig or a swine is bad for you, right? So that was a teachable moment.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think it kind of harkens back to the bastardization of fats
Right,
because, when I was a baby nurse practitioner, I used to tell my patients, yeah, eat the turkey bacon. It's lower in fat. And
right.
I mean, I cringe, but it also doesn't even look like bacon. I mean, first of all, it doesn't kind of crisp up when you cook it. It's just like this floppy, flaccid piece of faux bacon.
Yeah,
And if you've ever tasted real pig bacon, like really high quality, fatty pig bacon, it's unbelievably delicious. You understand why people get obsessive about bacon.
yeah. So those are two of the problems. But the big problem, the one that made me a heretic, a clown, who is this guy? This guy has no credentials. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And I mean thousands of, or maybe hundreds, not thousands of comments of me being the worst person in the world was the oatmeal. People came out and said, like, doesn't this guy know that oatmeal has 4 grams of protein? Okay. Okay. Per cup, you might have 3 or 4 grams. You might have 4 grams. So let's just give you benefit of the doubt on the 4 grams in a cup of oatmeal, right? And and the argument is a cup of oatmeal has 4 grams of carbs and an egg only has 6. It's not only, folks, because if you eat 3 eggs, you're getting 18 grams of protein with 0 carbohydrate, right? So you're getting and by the way, you're getting every amino acid that you need to build an animal from that egg. So let's not throw that out. In order to get 18 grams from oatmeal, you would have to now have 3 cups. And a cup of oatmeal has 28 grams of carbohydrate. So 3 times 28, now you're looking at damn near 90 grams, 85 grams of carbohydrates just to get the same amount. Oh, not even the same amount. That's only 12. So you'd have to have 4 cups. So you're over 100 grams of carbohydrates just to get the same thing you would get from 3 eggs.
To me, it's lunacy if we continue telling our clients and our patients that oatmeal is a healthy option to break your fast with, that irrespective of whether or not you intermittent fast or you've just gone 12 or 13 hours since you had dinner, to somehow suggest to the bulk of our population that we know is not metabolically healthy, to suggest to them that what they should break their fast with is a carbohydrate laden breakfast that is going to send their blood sugar. It's going to skyrocket their blood sugar and it's going to come crashing back down. And then they're going to be looking for more food. And to your point, in my estimation, we want at least, and 3 eggs actually will actually trigger this leucine threshold that we need to actually hit. And eggs are quite unique, but typically when people are looking to, have a breakfast or break their fast, protein is the way. But when we are encouraging our patients and our clients, and you and I are both born in the South, I was born in South Carolina.
Yeah.
I used to upset my grandmother when I would say, like, grits are delicious, but if that's what you're choosing to break your fast with, or a bowl of oatmeal, you're setting yourself up for blood sugar dysregulation the entire day. And so when I'm thinking about valuable information to convey, it's like, if you really love oatmeal, and I have teenagers, I have one that really loves oatmeal, but he incorporates it amongst other proteins. If he sees that he sits down and has bacon and eggs and he still wants some oatmeal, he'll eat it, but he does not eat that as his sole focus of a meal. And so when we talk about metabolic flexibility, we talk about the health of most Americans, it's really important for people to understand, like, we don't want more than 30 grams of carbohydrate in a meal. Like, we really don't. So when you talk about 4 cups of oatmeal, that's 4 times the amount of carbohydrate that we really should be eating in a meal. And if you think about it from that perspective, it makes a lot more sense. Like, I'm not saying don't eat carbs. That's not what we're saying, but be mindful of the types of carbohydrates that you choose to eat and what you eat them with, because that can have a big impact on your health.
Right. And I like what you said early in that comment where you said, you get that spike and it disrupts your entire day. The comment, because I did another one after that explaining, look, people got butthurt over oatmeal because your grandpappy, ate it and lived to be 105. I get it, because they weren't metabolically broken. Let's start with that. They had more of a diverse diet. But on top of that, you don't have to go very far, because a lot of people are going, oatmeal doesn't raise your blood sugar, which is crazy, because I just had Dr. Kaladzic on the show. He's coming up before this show, and he's got a whole book coming out on the CGM and how to use the CGM. And I was saying to these people, listen, don't take my word for it. Go throw a CGM on your arm and eat a cup of oatmeal. Don't take my word for it. If only there was a device you could get for $30 a month, or I think it's what, $30 every 2 weeks for a CGM.
Well, I think the Freestyle Libre, which is generally the device I recommend, it can be $70 to $90 per month. So yeah, like $35. And I always say, like, don't eat a meal out once a week or every other week, and that will cover.
But stop with that. Right. We can all tell people to stop going to Starbucks, cut something else out. Let's get away from that. You and I have been doing that forever. Oh, all you got to do is cut out Starbucks, or just cut out one meal out. Guess what, folks? This is your effing life you're dealing with. Think of all the stupid crap that the last time you bought a new pair of jeans to feel better about yourself, or a shirt to feel better about yourself, or the last time you treated yourself to that pair of shoes, or whatever you did. Okay, we could do all of that, but this is your life. And if someone is going to tell me I don't have enough money to spend $70, because you only really need it for 1 month. If you really, look, if you're a type 1 diabetic, insurance will cover it anyway. But if you just get it for 1 month and you just track, oh, wait, I ate oatmeal. Look what happened. Oh, wait, I just drank an IPA. Look what happened. Oh, wait, I thought I was just having a bite of pie after dinner. Look what happened. You can start looking at your life in real time. It's a teachable moment. You don't have to listen to some old gray-haired Italian like me, or some young Italian like Cynthia. Cynthia, you are Italian, right?
I am 25%, but still Italian. Yes.
Almost. She's almost. We'll claim you're so cute and everything. But you don't have to listen to us. Go see what's happening in your blood real time. Do it for a month, or hell, get it for 2 weeks, and just, look at everything you eat, and you'll go, oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah.
What say you, Cynthia?
No, I agree. In fact, for full transparency, I have a CGM company. Well, actually, they're an app that interprets the CGM. That's a podcast sponsor. But I talk about this all the time. It's one of the most valuable investments you can make in terms of looking at, like, what foods and stress and sleep quality and exercise do to your blood sugar. I mean, I episodically wear them a couple times a year. In fact, I just pulled one off, and I'll put one on probably tomorrow. And I tell everyone, I'm like, there's always something that's so insightful. Like, as an example, last year with the book launch, I had so much press that I was doing and so many interviews. I would get excited about the interview. My cortisol would go up, and then my blood sugar would go up, and then my insulin would correspondingly go up to bring my blood sugar. But it was like all day long watching my blood sugar go up and down because of the excitement of the interviews. But in most instances, I think it's particularly insightful to see, how does my body react to certain types of foods? Like, for me, I'm low carb, but I do carb cycle. And so for me, I will have sweet potato or root vegetables or plantains, which I used to love. And unbeknownst to me, every time I eat plantains, doesn't matter how I eat them, what I eat them with, they spike my blood sugar. So guess what? I don't eat. I don't eat plantains anymore. Right. But very insightful. And I would not have known that if I wasn't wearing a continuous glucose monitor. And so for me, they're a total game changer. And I think it keeps people honest, because if we have to keep pricking our finger with a glucometer, that can be a hassle. And I think for a lot of people, they don't want to do that all day long. So I agree. I think it's an investment in your metabolic health that everyone should embrace without question.
Yeah, look, I know I'm always in ketosis, so I do a thing where, I keep both. I have the Precision Extra where you could do the ketones and the blood sugar. And sometimes, like, when I get caught having that glass of wine because someone opened a bottle, or, I have a rule, if I'm looking at my sister-in-law, I can have a glass of wine because I see her once a year. And she has really good wine.
I bet.
Whenever I do that, I always prick my finger whenever I do things like that. I've actually pricked my fingers like, okay, I'm having a scotch. I'm going to wait an hour, let this get into my system, get well into the blood. Let me see how that's, let's see what's happening. And I'll see where the ketones are. I'll see where the blood is, just to play around. And that's me. I've been doing this for 12, 15 years, like 15 years now. And I'm still, I'll go, let me see where it is. Let me see how this alcoholic beverage, I'll tell you, I did it last week. I was showing on my, somewhere on Instagram or YouTube, hey, look, you can have a drink that kind of seems like a drink, a mixed drink. So I just muddled one cherry in there. I didn't put any cherry juice. I didn't add any kind of anything else. I put a little bitters in it because I wanted it to taste like a mixed drink. Right? And I did that, muddled the cherry, did the whole thing. When I got to the end, I purposely ate the cherry when I finished my drink. And then I waited about 45 minutes and checked. Blood sugar was a bit higher than it would be if I just had an alcoholic beverage. And I noticed my ketone levels came down. It drew my ketones down immediately. And when I just have straight alcohol, it doesn't really do that to any significant degree. So, but I'm willing to do that versus having, a Libre or something on my arm.
Yeah. And I think it's, for all of us, it's the power of the N of one. I tell people all the time, the whole concept of bioindividuality is figuring out what your body's unique response is to all of these lifestyle factors that we don't give enough credit to. And it's interesting, probably about 18 months ago, I got attacked, is the only way to put it, by a female cardiologist who will remain nameless, because she told me I was dispensing dangerous advice, recommending people to have a continuous glucose monitor. And I said, wait a minute, you're telling me that it's dangerous, and I'll put that in air quotes, to somehow suggest that our patients should empower themselves about their own health and wellness. And it later turned out this individual went on to be in cahoots with a pharmaceutical company that was marketing a new diabetes drug. So of course they don't want us to be empowering our patients. The pharmaceutical industry wants us to be prescribing more medications to address lifestyle, as opposed to addressing the lifestyle so they need less medication.
It's interesting you bring that up, Cynthia, because again, when I was talking to Kaladzig the other day, I said, why the government should be, the way we gave out free shots and all this, the government should be handing these things out for free. Is it because they don't want people to actually know the truth? Because once people know the truth, they would never eat a cereal again. They would never eat oatmeal again or grits, right? Once you know the truth, you can't unknow that truth, right? So look, now you got me all hyped up. When guys like me started talking 12, 15 years ago about, on the internet about low carb, we were called, lunatics, oh, they should have tinfoil hats. They're going to kill people. Well, in fact, people did not die. Not only did they not die, people started losing hundreds of pounds per person, not overall, because of that N1 you were talking about. Not only that, they were coming off of drugs. Not only that, they were not doing crazy vegan diets anymore. They were doing all kinds of good, good was coming out of this. So then the narrative changed. Oh, wait, yeah, you can get healthy that way, but you're killing the earth because you're eating meat. There's a polar bear that's floating around on a single piece of ice because the entire North Pole has now melted. and you would always see that polar bear on a piece of ice. You remember that was the early days. Look, this polar bear is starving on a piece of ice, right? All they did was change the narrative. They didn't change anything else. What say you?
No, it's interesting. I think I'm particularly sensitive to these kinds of conversations because even when my book came out last year, people were like, "Oh, she's keto. Oh, she's low carb," and they just kind of discounted the message, saying, "Oh, because you believe in this ideology." And I always say, "Listen, I believe in the power of the N of one. I think that it's important for us as individuals to do a degree of experimentation. However, my caveat is always, if we know most Americans are not metabolically healthy, why would we not consider a lower carbohydrate lifestyle, at least as a starting point?" You mentioned you see so many people that have so much success with reducing the amount of carbohydrate and the quality of carbohydrates in their lives. And a lot of my intersect is with women in middle age who all of a sudden are losing insulin sensitivity as they're getting older. And as a byproduct of all these hormonal changes, we have to change our relationship with carbohydrates. And so on a lot of different levels, this concern over nutritional dogma kind of shifts to environmental concerns. And yet when you really look at the research, and I always think about a good example is Rob Wolf's book, Sacred Cow, that he co-wrote with, is it Diana Rogers? I'm hoping it. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm terrible with names. So admittedly, I said that with a little bit of hesitation for a moment, and really looking at this landscape and this narrative about conventional food lot meat versus regenerative agriculture, and really getting a sense of what's going on. And the real truth of it all is, in many ways, the federal government really doesn't want us. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just speaking based on the facts as I know them. They really don't want people to question where their food comes from. They don't want to question the way that their food is raised on monocrop soil or conventional food lot meat, or whether we're talking about the way that our animals are eating, our domesticated animals. And so it just becomes a larger picture of just acknowledging that as we learn, hopefully we do better, and we take the information we've learned and we share it with others. Like, that's why I think your platform and my own are so important, because we're just trying to educate people. Like, wake up. If you still believe when you go to the grocery store that everything in the grocery store is healthy for you, then we've got a lot of retraining to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I wonder, because politicians still seem to be going in the wrong direction. The last presidential cycle, there were no shortage, and I put it in one of my movies. There was no shortage of candidates that were running for president that was pushing no meat, meatless Mondays. We need to get meat out of schools. The one guy, I can't remember his name now, one of the senators that was running on the left, I got it. Get it. You're a vegan, right? You're a vegan, so I get where you are. At the same time, the woman who became our vice president, Kamala Harris, they asked her that question, and she just went, right, well, Kamala, it seems like, will say anything to agree with anybody at any time. So they said, well, what do you think about Meatless Mondays? She was like, yeah, go for it. Yeah, that sounds good to me. And I'm like, are you serious? And by the way, folks, I don't hate Kamala. I don't know Kamala Harris. I don't hate her. I don't love her. I'm not a leftist or a rightist. I'm nothing. I don't talk politics. But I have that clip in my third movie. And my third movie is Beyond Impossible. I talk about that because there she is going, oh yeah, meatless Monday sounds like a good deal to me. Now this woman is one beat away from being the president, one heartbeat away from being the president of the United States. That's scary stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think politicians, at least in my estimation, and again, being apolitical, because that's not the context of our conversation, is that I think most politicians will just say whatever they need to say in order to appeal to whoever's listening at that given point in time. And I think if people decide to do a meatless Monday because it's for financial reasons, like they say, okay, and unfortunately, let's be clear, like, meat has gotten way more expensive. And we're both very fortunate that even with the changes in meat prices, we've been able to, and I have teenage boys, so, like, we spend an insane amount of money on meat and fish and poultry and all that. But the point of why I'm saying this is that I think when the concept of Meatless Monday came out, at least I interpreted it as people were trying to be mindful of their budgets. And they were like, okay, maybe this is a day that we're going to have legumes and beans, and that would never be my choice because those things make me gassy. But that's neither here nor there. But I think in some instances, I got the sense it was for financial reasons, that people were maybe going to have a less animal centric view, or maybe that's the night they're going to crack open a can of polecat tuna and they're going to make tuna salad for their dinner. But I think it has veered away from that into, oh, let's do all plant-based. I know when I was just out in LA last month, and I ordered room service because I was just going to work from my room before I went to this event. And the gentleman who brought up my naked burger and a salad was like, "I'm so happy to see a woman eating meat." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "I know that sounds strange, but in LA, most people don't eat meat, or they're vegan." And so I thought that was really interesting. I was like, "Oh no, this is my standard." And it becomes a running joke when people see me traveling. I'm like, "Here's my naked burger and my salad. This is what I do." And he just said that we have had to actually take a lot of meat related meals off of our menu out of request. And he said we were buying a lot of meat that wasn't getting eaten. And I was like, what a shame. So seeing it as an opportunity to help people understand that, the plant-based diet narrative, I think, can be problematic. And to just kind of circle through this, at one point when my kids were younger, I was a co-director of Real Food for Kids in my area. And so we worked very hard to get locally sourced meat and vegetables into our kids' meals. And we did that quite successfully. And when I see some of the examples of what most subsidized breakfasts and lunches look like for kids in different parts of the country, I just think to myself, it's one massive carb load of crap. It's all like these processed carbs, and we think we're doing right by our kids. And I think that if we aren't in a position to want to prioritize the quality of the food that we offer our youth, what does that say about us as a culture?
I couldn't agree more. And I want to give you a little pushback on a couple of things. The Meatless Monday stuff that started in New York, it started because of a vegan mayor who was taking it out of schools. So parents weren't paying for this to begin with. That's kind of where, and then California picked up on the Meatless Monday thing too. It's just a great alliteration, meat and Monday, Meatless Monday, it just kind of works. And they're trying to teach kids that eating meat is bad for you. That was the whole idea behind Meatless Monday. Hey, we're making healthier choices by not having this bad food. So we have a whole generation of kids growing up that think meat is actually bad for you, right? And this is not so much a pushback as much as it is, you're right, meat is expensive. But why can't we have the same subsidies that the grain companies get for the meat companies? The reason grain is so cheap is because we subsidize that. And we, look, if you don't have to go very far to figure out that we subsidize grains for a very good reason. It's because we have a commodities market where we trade it around the world. We figured this out during World War II when farms were, quote unquote, too big to fail. Maybe you heard that again back in 2008, right? Just like we bailed out some of the financial companies and car companies and whatever, we bailed out the wheat companies, and then the government went, whoa, wait, Hank, we like being on this business. This is good. That's why fast food is so cheap, because it's all subsidized crap. It's very inexpensive. We can do the same thing with meat, right? We as a government just chooses not to.
No. And that's a good point. I guess back in the old days, my mom did Meatless Mondays, and that was just something she always did. So when I was saying Meatless Mondays, to me, it's something that I've been hearing about for such a long period of time. And yes, if you have a vegan politician in a city, one of the biggest cities in the United States, and they're driving nutritional policy for children, that's incredibly biased. And I think in many ways, I think a lot of people make the assumption that somehow that's healthier. But again, I go back to the metabolic health piece. And if we're not eating enough protein as a society, and we're overeating processed carbohydrates, and we're eating the wrong types of fats, which are those adulterated seed oils, it becomes an enormous problem. And so I agree with you, whether that's the USDA, Big Ag, processed food industry, they all heavily influence public policy. And this is, again, we go back to, looking at policies that were started post-World War II with good intentions that have now morphed into really disturbing trends. And if you start even following, as an example, the organic food companies that have been overrun by Mars and some of these huge conglomerates, you just realize that everything is focused on profitability and not on health, and certainly not on not to the benefit of consumers. It's more like, let's make you more addicted. Let's make things more hyper palatable. Let's make them to the point where you don't even realize how much food you've consumed because you've just sat down and ate 5 bags of chips, and you feel like you just want more and more and more. It's like the hijacking of our entire communication patterns within our bodies and our brains to continue to support these what I consider to be unsavory food practices. But yes, I agree with you that if two major cities or one major city and a entire state in the United States are heavily pushing one very polarizing nutritional paradigm / agenda, I think that's concerning. And much to your point, even with your last documentary, kind of making people more aware of how all of these policies really do impact us as consumers. It's time to kind of get educated about it.
I want to change gears just a bit. We're going to get into talking about some lady parts and what happens to women during menopause. And then I want to dovetail that into, I'm always talking about sarcopenia, because I think people think sarcopenia starts when you hit like 60. They don't realize that you need to start paying attention when you're 30 or even younger than that. We're going to get into that right after I tell you guys about Villicapelli olive oil. Yep, you hear me all the time saying fruit juice is not good, but there's one fruit juice you want, and that's olive oil, right? Olives, that's a fruit, and the oil is the juice. Best fruit juice in the world. Villicapelli, I've been yelling about this company on this show for about 11 years. They're the first sponsor we ever had. They have sponsored every show since probably the 40th or 50th show, and we've done well over 2,300 of these now. So Villicapelli, the stuff is amazing. You want to go to villicapelli.com, check out everything they have there. Put in promo code Vinnie, VINNIE. You'll get 10% off. Now, I'm going to give you a little workaround. Olive oil, the real stuff is expensive. Now, Villicapelli is less expensive, even though it's the real stuff, and it tastes great. But if you're going to get a 3-liter 10, that's going to be close to about $100. That's going to last you a long time. I would encourage you to spend another $40. So if you get up to around $140 worth of product, and then you put that promo code in, you're going to still be above $125, and that's going to kick in free shipping from Villicapelli. So 2 ways to save. Villicapelli, go get that olive oil. I keep several 3-liter 10s right here in the house. It's the good stuff. So go check them out. Villicapelli, promo code Vinnie. We're talking to nurse practitioner, author of, what's it called? The Fasting Something and the Something Else. And
The Intermittent Fasting Transformation.
Yeah. Go check her book out, Cynthia Thurlow. Cynthia, let's talk a little bit about what happens to, because most of the phone calls I take every week, premenopausal, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, I'm hearing from menopausal women. And every time I get the opportunity to hear you speak live, I sit there and listen intently because I need something to tell these people.
Yeah, I think that we do a really less than stellar job as clinicians with supporting women beyond the age where they're having children. So let's kind of talk about what perimenopause represents. It's the 10 to 15 years preceding menopause. Menopause is 12 months without a menstrual cycle. Here in the United States, that's 51 is the average age of menopause. And so women, if you're in your late 30s, early 40s, you're there. And so I think about 25% of OBGYN focus is on menopause, but that doesn't mean that it has to be taught in their curriculum, and they certainly don't have to focus in on it during their residency or training. So I think that's also important just to know there's a lot of emphasis appropriately on younger women and contraception and pregnancy and the postpartum period. But in many ways, we don't talk or educate women enough about their bodies, like what's to come, what's going to happen. And one thing that I want to kind of shine a light on, and I give a lot of credit to Dr. Jolene Brighton for this, is talking about the impact of oral contraceptives. And I can respect, and certainly I was on oral contraceptives for most of my 20s up until when I got married. But if we understand the long-term net impact of being on oral contraceptives, it blunts peak bone building years. So women's peak bone building is really in your 20s up to about 30. And that's also when we have like this peak bone and muscle mass. And so if you're kept in a very low estrogen state, and if you don't know, when you take the oral contraceptive to prevent pregnancy, in most instances, it's also keeping your hormone levels very low, like almost at a stage of where they are when a woman is menopausal. So very low estrogen, low progesterone. And so what can happen is you lose the ability to build that peak bone and muscle mass. And why is this important? Because this will tie into your comment about sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is a muscle loss with aging. It's not a question of if, but when, but it really accelerates after the age of 40. Why is this relevant? Because this is when women are at the beginning stages of perimenopause. And so what many women and men, for this matter, don't understand is that a lot of our lifestyle choices impact whether or not we accelerate that process of muscle mass loss, or we continue to support gaining and maintaining lean muscle mass. Some of that's hormonally mediated, but a great deal of it is lifestyle mediated. We have a culture that is largely focused in on what I call chronic cardio. And I'm not suggesting that cardio is bad, but there are a lot of women that would rather go out and pound out 10 miles a day than they would prefer to lift weights. And I'm here to remind women how critically important it is to maintain and build muscle mass throughout your lifetime. And you start to get a little bit of a slippery slope in your 40s, it can be harder to build muscle. It can be harder to maintain muscle. And the way to think about both young muscle and older muscle is think about a fillet, like a tenderloin, a very lean piece of muscle meat versus a ribeye. Ribeyes are delicious, but they're infiltrated by a lot of fat. And that is what starts to happen in the muscles. And it's helpful for people to understand, like, as you're losing muscle mass, you lose insulin sensitivity. Why is this important? We have a population that is becoming increasingly less metabolically healthy. And so when I talk to women in particular about this, it's, okay, make sure you're lifting weights, which I know you talk a lot about, Vinnie. And even if it's starting with body weight exercises, that's a good starting point. Make sure you're eating enough protein. And this is the piece that I was tying in about how important it is to just be cognizant of what you're breaking your fast with, irrespective to whether or not you intermittent fast. Certainly I recognize not everyone does that. 30 grams of protein is what you need in a meal to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and ensuring that you're getting no less than 100 grams of protein a day. Now, most individuals that are listening to this podcast, I'm sure they know how important protein is. But for those that are not aware of this, if you aren't eating enough protein, you're not going to be able to stimulate this muscle protein synthesis, which means you're going to accelerate this loss of muscle tissue. And so the other piece that starts to happen as women are losing estrogen. So yes, you have changes to the amount of progesterone that your ovaries are producing as you're getting older. Our eggs are as old as we are. Men, replenish sperm every couple of days. It's just a differences between our genders. As we are losing progesterone, we can have this relative estrogen dominance, which might mean, our periods are heavier, may have tender breasts, we may be weight loss resistant. But at some point towards the end of perimenopause, we will have lower levels of estrogen. And this lower levels of estrogen combined with high levels of follicular stimulating hormone, and I won't get too technical here, means that we become catabolic. That means if we're not eating enough protein, we will start breaking down our muscle. And so again,
folks,
yeah.
Not only muscle, but remember, some of your organs, your heart, you're going to damage your heart. I just wanted to, I don't know if you were going to add that, but go on.
Yeah. No, so it's important for people to understand there's skeletal muscle that will be broken down in response to this. And so it's just kind of reinforcing why it's important for people to understand. So low estrogen in the body, you are going to lose some degree of insulin sensitivity. So you're more prone to being insulin resistant and or diabetic. This is when you start becoming weight loss resistant. There's a lot of different things that happen physiologically, but Vinnie had wanted me to kind of address this. And then 12 months without a menstrual cycle, if you're not, again, lifting weights, hitting those protein macros, really, really important. And when it comes to carbohydrates, it's important to just note this. I'm not anti-carb, but if you know that you're not metabolically flexible, let's say your fasting insulin is 10, or you know that your blood sugar regularly is 110 or greater than 100 all the time, then it's a sign that there are things you can do that can improve your insulin sensitivity, like walking after a meal, lifting weights, making sure you get high quality sleep, ensuring that you're lifting heavy things. And the question I always get, Vinnie, is, what does that mean? And I always remind people it should be challenging. Like once you've learned the basics of how to lift properly, and certainly if you're new to lifting, work with a trainer, someone that works with someone in your age group, don't go to the 20-year-old at the gym that only works with the gym bros and young men. make sure they know how to help women lift properly, because I think technique is very, very important, as you know, because you definitely don't want to hurt yourself. And if you're doing those things, it can improve, that kind of navigation from perimenopause into menopause. Unfortunately, I see a lot of limiting beliefs on social media where women will just say, oh, it's just the age I am. I'm supposed to have painful joints. I'm supposed to be 20 pounds above my ideal body weight. It doesn't have to be that way. And I certainly, hope that, some of the things that we're talking about can spurn people's understanding that there are things you can do. Even intermittent fasting can be a really integral part of that for many individuals. Eating less often can be very, very helpful.
I'm going to embarrass or throw my wife under the bus here in order to help other people. First, let me brag about her. As most people know, Serena grew up as a model from the time she was, I don't know, 16 or whatever. She was one of those European, always out there working like a true working model. They didn't call them supermodels back in the 70s, that term, but she was one of those people, magazine covers and whatever. And she was known, one of the biggest German swimsuit companies. She was their girl, right? And her nickname back in those days, and this is the part she's going to kill me over, was Serena Scott Bottom, because she had, people think of Serena as being tall and willowy, which she is, but she had this great perky butt, right? So that was her nickname, Serena Scott Bottom, because she had a great ass. Serena kept that great ass. I mean, look, I noticed her in her 40s. That great ass was still there. That's when we got together. And Serena was just starting to run 10Ks, half marathons. That's how we met. She was coming in from a run at the Starbucks. I was leaving the Starbucks on a bike ride. We met at a Starbucks. People go, you guys really met at a Starbucks? Yeah. Yeah, I was meeting a client at a Starbucks to go for a ride, and she was coming back, and they knew each other. So by the time Serena and I started dating and she saw I was into ultracycling, she wanted to know if there was a version of ultracycling for runners. And I said, yeah, it's way bigger than ultracycling. It's ultra running. And if you live anywhere near where Cynthia and I live, there's huge ultra running communities here. You want to talk chronic aerobics. Ultra runners are as sick a puppy as you can get. These people are chronic. So Serena got into that. Serena got into the 50Ks, the 100Ks, the 100 milers, this sort of thing. I think her longest race was 89 miles. She's never actually done a 100 miler, but and by the way, that was in the mountains, but an 89-mile mountain run, around mountains and whatever. Her butt became flat, right? Completely flat. I mean, like a door slammed into it and never popped back out. And you want to talk muscle, and this is a woman that was capable of running 100 miles, right? Regularly ran 100 Ks, and the butt kept getting, as a matter of fact, I started jokingly calling it frog butt. If a frog stood up on his hind legs, he would, a frog has no butt, right? You just see two legs and he just goes straight up into the frog's back. That's what happened to her body. And of course, she's explaining to me because she went through menopause in the middle of all this, and she claims running, and rightly so, running helped her get through menopause. She just kept running through menopause and it saved her. But somehow, some way, she started running less, got away from racing so much. So now she was just running 10 miles here and there. And then she had to go to England for an extended period to deal with a family member who was sick. And she didn't want to run around London. She didn't know if it was very safe or whatever. So she went to a bar class. This is where, you're doing more lunges and squatting down, even though there's no weight and all this stuff. And she did that first class and she made it through with ease because, she's very aerobically fit. She called me the next morning. She goes, I had trouble sitting down on the toilet. I said, what's wrong? She's like, my ass is so sore. My hamstrings are so sore. I thought I was in shape. And I said, you never, as a husband, you know this, Cynthia. Mm-hmm. You can't say I told you so. So I went, well, there you have it, hon. And she goes, I think I'm going back to that class again. And she did. And then she started looking around to see if there was other classes like that bar class. She found other, Pilates classes where she was now working her muscles in an anaerobic fashion. By the time she got back from England, I cannot lie to you and tell you I saw any difference. Actually, I saw a little difference in her stomach, right? I started seeing some abs that she used to have, right? Not that she got fat, but when you start running, all of that smooths out, right? The loss of estrogen, everything else. She was looking, even though she was skinny smooth. with no ass. God, I hope she never hears this show. Well, when she got back home, she went immediately and found this other class, solid core. And they do a lot of, advanced Pilates type stuff, a lot of lunges, a lot of squatting down. They add springs to it. Now, you see, for years, there's a weightlifting rack right behind me. There's a squat rack right here. I would get her in here for one day and she would, it hurts. I don't want to do it. It's boring. I don't know. I tried to bring it to the gym with me in town where she could be around other human beings. I don't know. This is boring. I'm just sitting here staring out the window. I don't like it. It's too much downtime. But putting her in a class, she found her niche, right? She found what she likes. I swear to you, at 61 years old, this woman's ass and legs now look like I've never seen them look in the history of us being together. We've been together for 16, 17 years.
That's amazing. A fun fact is when we lived in Northern Virginia, there was a solid core studio about a mile from our house, 2 miles. And I used to bring Todd because Todd needed core work. He's, played college lacrosse, played senior lacrosse up until the pandemic, now does jujitsu. It kicked his butt. I loved solid core. Now it's a little too far from my house, but it's amazing to see how when you're using accessory muscles, how it can work you differently. I think solid core is one of the most challenging things I've ever done, but I love it. And I still do Pilates, but my little tie-in about Pilates and bar that I've seen in multiple studios is a lot of people, that's all they do. And I always say, like, I do those things to challenge myself, but also to really work my core and to use that accessory muscle use. But there's a class on Saturday mornings at my local Pilates studio that I like to go to, except for this morning because I had to go to the vet. And I'm always amazed at how great these women look, but they all have pancake butt. And it's because, you have this catabolic impact that starts to happen as women are making this perimenopause and menopause shift. And, to me, I always say, like, the fact that I've been able to maintain my glutes, thank goodness, at this stage of life is really a testament to how diligently you have to work at it. So, bravo to her for, that's a lot of hard work and effort because it's so much more challenging to maintain and build muscle at this stage of life than it is when we're younger. But, myself included, I didn't know what I didn't know back when I was in my 20s.
And by the way, to Serena's credit, because anyone who can convince themselves to run 50 and
impressive
75 miles, they're willing to work hard.
Yes.
Right. You just have to find the work you're willing to do. It wasn't long after she got back when she said to me one day, she goes, "Oh, look at this. They just sent me a thing from Solidcore. They said, I just completed my 50th class." I'm like, wow, you did that pretty quickly. Because she goes not every day, but I want to say she goes 4 or 5 days a week. I mean, she goes a lot. And then it wasn't long after that. She goes, "Oh, look at that. They just sent me a message. I just did 100 classes." And now
awesome.
she's 150 or so classes in, and it hasn't been that long. And her body, I'm shocked at how well, I've been in this business for a long time and I've built a lot of older people's bodies, right? I'm shocked because, again, the genetics, she's got those just crazy genetics, right? All she had to do is go back to it. And by the way, feels better. I mean, this is a woman that's been in menopause for over 10 years.
That's amazing. And that's all, I mean, I would imagine there's a degree of muscle memory. Those muscles know what they need to do.
Right.
But I think it really speaks to the fact that it is possible. That's why I go back to the limiting belief piece, that I think it's so important for men and women to hear the message that it is possible to be middle-aged and still have plenty of energy, be active, be vibrant. We were talking before we started recording about my 11-year-old dog jumped off the bed this morning and had a little bit of a strain to one of his, I think to his dog wrist. And my this vet who I don't normally see said, "Oh, I can't believe he's 11. I said, "Well, he normally walks 3 to 5 miles every day. We're in a very hilly part of the state. And I think half the battle is just remaining active, finding something that you love, much to Serena's point. She really loves solid core. I think that's fantastic."
Yeah. Since you brought up your dog, and we might be getting out of our lane just a little bit. I've actually had people on the podcast about this. Folks, I'm not an expert in this. I don't know if Cynthia is an expert in this, but dog food. I mean, it's kind of a third rail because, not so much a third rail but it's more people go, "You're not in your lane," and I've had experts come on and talk about this, that, and the other thing in the past. we're always on the hunt. I've actually looked at it because when you look at some of the really high end stuff, I'm telling Serena, look, we could just mix a little kibble with actual ground meat, right? And when you buy the really cheap ground meat, it's less expensive, right? What say you on dog food? Because we're always looking around, and I got to tell you, folks, we're empty nesters, and we don't have a lot of bills and that kind of thing. So we do spend extra money on dog food around here. We have one dog, and it's one of the luxuries we have, and I get not everyone can do that. But what say you on the subject?
Yeah. So I recently interviewed a holistic vet. And so I will kind of paraphrase some of the things that we talked about in our conversation, the research that I did. I did not know, in all my infinite wisdom, that there is distinctions to what is considered to be food here in the United States. So when animals go to slaughter, there is food grade food, so the food that is fed to humans. And then everything else is kind of effectively pulverized or cooked down for animal food. And so the way to think about this, if a cow goes off to slaughter and it's got an abscess on its thigh, that's not put into our food supply, that's put into the animal's food supply. And one of the things that Dr. Judy Morgan said to me was, remember there was a flood in North Carolina a few years ago? And I was like, yeah. And she said, remember how there were a lot of chickens that drowned? And I said, yes. She said, do you know what happened to those chickens? And I said, oh, I'm sure they're probably incinerated. Nope. So there's a company that comes around and picks up all the decaying and putrefying birds, brings them to a facility where they sit out in the hot sun. So imagine the continued putrefaction of these birds, along with whatever else had been dumped there, dead, sometimes euthanized animals are thrown in with this mix. So the medication that are given to animals to euthanize them is then part of their food supply. And so they put them in these, I apologize to anyone who's eating right now, but they put them into a large vat that is put at very high heat, and everything is cooked down. And when I say everything, feathers, hooves, everything is cooked down. They skim off the fat, and the rest is used for animal food. So if you have kibble in your house, and let me be very clear, I thought up until this conversation that we were spending all this money on, high quality, I'll put it in air quotes, dog kibble is too high in carbohydrate for our pets. So 60 to 70% of domesticated animals here in the United States are obese, much like humans.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with the quality of the food. So what Dr. Judy had explained to me was what's better is either making food from animal, like human grade food, like you were saying, inexpensive ground meats. If you have, cow or whatever ground meat is certainly fine. Raw meat is another option. Sometimes it's cooked down with organ bones is another option that may not be financially feasible. And I want to just back up and say, this was a complete departure. I mean, it's like, as I was doing all this research, I was shocked to know the lack of quality that's fed to our animals. And is it any wonder that we have animals in many ways that are much sicker than where they would have been 30 years ago? Like she used the example, and she said, when I was initially in practice in the 1980s, a golden retriever would live 15 to 17 years. Now they're lucky if they get 7 to 9. And so that was very sobering. So for people to understand, there are companies out there, Farmer's Dog is probably one of the other ones. Stella and Chewy has stuff that you can keep in the freezer. There's Rut Row. I don't have any affiliation with any of these companies. It's RAH Row, kind of like Scooby-Doo, Rut Row.
Rut Row. Yeah.
Rut Row. And those are certainly options, but I didn't actually know that. And so when we were talking about me coming on the show, I was like, if I didn't know, I'm sure lots of other people didn't know. So it's really about finding the best quality food you can feed your animal. I think that's really what it comes down to. And just building awareness that most of the stuff that's out there is just really, it's not the right, it should be more protein, less carbohydrates, much like people, right? Like we're eating too many carbohydrates and not enough protein ourselves. So we're transitioning over to this new food, and my dogs are very happy.
Yeah. I've always, both of my last two Vishalas made it past 14 and a half, going on 15. One of them was almost 15, and that's an 11 to 12-year dog.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, they made good runs, but it was always, high quality, trying to get the highest quality, whatever. And, it's just so difficult. And I would spend my last dollar, people go, oh, what do you do with all your money? And it's like, well, take care of my dogs.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of the family. and you don't want a visual to get heavy. You don't want to, you don't want them to get cancer or whatever. So I'm always trying to find, I want, if you don't mind, if you can send me through an email,
Yeah,
an introduction to this doctor. I'd love to get
absolutely.
one because I'm
Yeah.
always trying to learn, and people are always, I get that on the phone calls. People, when I do the consults, they'll say, listen, what about the animals? Like, I can't give recommendations. I know what I give my animal, but I can't give recommendations because I don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, and what I like about her is she has a website that you can go to. She has books, she has products. She has an acupuncture, an animal acupuncture chiropractor. I mean, she's got it all. So she practiced both traditional kind of allopathic veterinary medicine and then also complementary, and was just a wealth of information. I mean, I think you would really enjoy talking to her because it just completely blew my mind. But she's all about owner advocacy, like helping you advocate for your pet so that you are making the best decisions. Because I was telling her that when I lived in Northern Virginia, I had a great vet who was very collaborative. He was always open to hearing, when I would ask him questions. And the first veterinary practice we went to in Richmond, it was less that way. They were kind of offended that I was asking, is this vaccine actually, and I'm not anti-vaccine, but I would say, the Lyme vaccine I heard isn't very effective. And then they make you feel guilty if you don't give it to your pet. Oh, well, you live in an endemic area and they're outside in the woods and you do trail rides. And the first thing she said to me was, Cynthia, those Lyme vaccines are like 60% effective. And I was like, no way. And so she would be a great resource for you. And I'll be happy to make an intro.
Yeah, please, because I'm always interested in that. People are always asking me about it. So I'd like to, maybe get back to that. The audience always grows around here, and people, like, a lot of times people say, hey, when are you going to have, like, people kept saying to me, when are you going to have Ted Naiman? You've never had, it's like, oh, Ted's been on the show. Okay. Ted's a friend of the show. Your name comes. When are you going to have Cynthia on? Well, Cynthia's a friend of the show recently, but people don't go back and listen. That's why I like to bring people back on over and over again, because the message has to continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it's time I bring a vet back on, and she sounds like she'd be great. So I'd like to talk to her. Anything else before I let you go?
No, I'm in the midst of starting to write my second book, but I'm still at the point where I have to sell more of the first book. I know you have been through the whole publishing industry. I am sure you have strong opinions, and it's amazing how, you're in a position to be able to go back to your publisher if you've, sold a certain amount of books. So we're working diligently towards that. They like the idea of the second book. So I'm kind of writing that on the side and actively working on the rest of the stuff.
I'll tell you off air what I think, and if you want to stick around for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Folks, go check out everything Cynthia Thurlow is doing. Cynthia, I don't have your notes in front of me. Tell them where they can find you, please.
Yeah. So www.cynthiathurlow.com. You can connect with me for Everyday Wellness, which is my podcast. Vinnie's been a guest on there twice. Podcasting is one of my favorite things I do in my business. You can also connect with me on Instagram. Be forewarned, if you catch up with me on Twitter, sometimes I can be a little snarky. I've got a free Facebook group that is for men and women on Facebook called Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle / my name. And obviously my book, The Intermittent Fasting Transformation, IF45, is my signature book talking about women and fasting.
Go check all of that out. That book is in the Vinnie Book Club over at VinnieTortorich.com. That book club connects right to Amazon, so go check it out. Debbie or someone or Megan will put it right in the forefront when this podcast comes out, and it will be in the show notes. Before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com, click through the banner. It puts a little coal on the fire, gets my train down the track, and I'm able to keep the show free for a gazillion years in a row. We also have the NSNG ebook at VinnieTortorich.com, and you can also check out my book, same name as this podcast, Fitness Confidential, over on Amazon. So check all of that out. On behalf of Cynthia Thurlow, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with enthusiasm.